I'm Jelani with Bob Samurai.
Hi there.
For you, how did you get into the craft of acting and voice acting? Where did that come from?
Well, I talk in depth about how I sort of broke into voice acting on my podcast. I have a podcast on voice acting called Voice Acting Mastery.
Cool.
But in a nutshell, I was a theatrical actor. I had been going to grad school in New York City and was doing theater in New York, Broadway, off-Broadway, regionally. But I'd always had a passion for animation. And a friend of mine had caught me watching some anime when I was at a theater festival over the summer and offered to put me in touch with a studio that was dubbing anime. Initially, I wasn't sure if I wanted to do it because I wasn't the biggest fan of dubs, but then I realized that I wanted to make dubs as good as possible because that was a lot of people's introduction to anime. So I reconsidered and called them up and said, sure, put me in touch. So I auditioned for the studio. They wanted a demo. I didn't really have a voiceover demo at the time, but I had been producing a radio theater company at my grad school, so I sent them one of my radio theater plays, which is totally the wrong thing to do, but I guess I didn't totally suck, and so they called me in to audition for some things, and the first show I auditioned for was a little anime show called The Slayers. I played a small part on that. And then they were recasting one of the main characters, Zelgadis, so I auditioned for Zelgadis, and they booked me as Zelgadis, and then it was off to the races. From then, I was doing a lot of anime in New York, and then eventually I moved to Los Angeles to pursue voiceover more full-time, and I've been working in animation, video games, and anime ever since.
Cool, very cool. Recently, what bodies of work are you currently right now in, or is there any that you are currently working on? Maybe nothing secretive, but like something that you are currently in?
Right. Well, the thing I'm probably most famous for right now is the character of Winston in Overwatch. That one tends to be one of the more popular characters that people ask me to sign for. I also play the character of Red Arrow in Young Justice animated series, and also Itachi in Naruto.
For you, outside of voice acting and things like that, I mean, do you have like other creative outlets that you pursue, or maybe hobbies and things like that to kind of like are your thing?
I do. I'm also a mythology scholar. I do presentations on how the different religious traditions of different countries affect pop culture heroes. So why do Americans write about superheroes, and why do the Japanese write about giant robots, and all of the mythological underpinnings behind those stories. So I also have another website called mythologyandmeaning.com, where I talk about the different presentations that I do, and there's a trailer there, and I'm hoping to be able to put out a podcast on that topic as well, hopefully in the near future. I do this mythology scholarship not only for my own artistic fulfillment and enrichment to help me be a better actor and writer and performer, but also to become a better person. It's for self-actualization or self-improvement. So it's my belief that we become the stories we tell ourselves. So it behooves us to learn about the different possibilities in storytelling so that we can write our own story, our own life story, the way we want.
You also mentioned a little bit earlier that you currently do run a podcast, right?
Yes, I run a podcast, the Voice Acting Mastery podcast at voiceactingmastery.com. There's also a sister podcast called the Voice Acting Mastery Field Report, which is a secondary podcast that I have a bunch of my correspondents create content for. They are at the beginning of their voice acting careers, which is very different from where I was almost, 20 years ago now, when I was starting to voice act. So there are 2 podcasts now that I'm currently running on voice acting.
How did you come about wanting to do those podcasts? I mean, were those something that like kind of, what was the inception of that?
The voice acting podcasts really came out of the fact that the most common question I was asked at a convention was, how do I become a voice actor? And while it's a very simple question to ask, it's a very complicated question to answer. And it's not really possible to answer it effectively in a 30-second soundbite. right? Usually what comes out of my mouth are things that are like, know thyself, or, get in touch with your feelings. And while this is all true, it sort of sounds like the Oracle at Delphi. It's not very useful. You can't go home and do anything with that. So I wanted to create an answer for people who were interested in becoming voice actors that was more practical, that was more useful. And I knew that I would have to have a longer format in order to do that. And it seemed like the best way for me to reach an audience was through a podcast. Like most voice actors, I have a recording studio at home where I need to be able to do my auditions and other voiceover work. And I thought, well, why not use it to do some podcasting and see what that's all about? So back in the summer of 2011, I started doing the podcast, and it's been running ever since.
Cool. And how many episodes do you have for the podcast?
The main podcast is around, I think, 132 episodes at this point. And the Voice Acting Mastery Field Report, the sister podcast, is, I think, just about to break 30 episodes.
Are these? Is the podcast something that listeners or people out there who are watching this interview, is it something that they should start from the beginning of it and going through, or is it something accessible to jump into in the middle? Or
well, I mean, you can jump in the middle if you want, or you can look through the titles and the subjects and see what interests you and zero in on that podcast if you want. But I would suggest listening to it from the beginning. I think it has a certain arc. And actually, when I got to episode 100, I actually gave the advice to go back and start over from the beginning, because you learn more after you've actually got some experience. So when you listen to the podcast and then you actually go out and try it and you come back, there are things you can hear in the podcast you didn't hear before because you didn't have as much experience. You hadn't gotten as much mileage. So, but that was back in episode 100, and now we're at episode 130 something. So
it's very cool. And so with that, like for people who are out there, and if they want to find out more about like your body work or actually follow you, is there a place they can go to check out all about where you are and where to find you?
Sure. My main website as a voice actor is crispinfreeman.com. My demos are there, and there's a link to the IMDb, the Internet Movie Database, which has a list of my credits. And there's also links there to the Voice Acting Mastery website, voiceactingmastery.com, and my Mythology website, mythologyandmeaning.com. And so that's usually the best place to find information about me.
Okay. Thank you so much.
You bet.
Appreciate it.